Hello, and welcome to A Postdoc's Journal, the show that takes you through my journey into and eventually out of academia as a postdoctoral research scientist. My name is Simit Patel. Hello, thank you very much for joining me, and a very warm welcome to all of you who may have listened before and those of you who may be listening for the first time. Now, have you ever felt like no matter how hard you try, it just never feels like it is enough? That's actually what today's episode is all about. So if you don't already know, this podcast is based on my own personal journal. Each episode, I read out entries from my own personal journal from around 12 years ago, back when I was working in academia as a research scientist, as a postdoc. Then I reflect on it, I analyze it, I try to make sense of it, and share my thoughts with you today with the benefits of 12 years of hindsight. And so if you are a student or a postdoc, or if you're just someone struggling with the emotional side of working in academia, or even if you're not in academia and you're just struggling with the emotional side of work and life, I hope that by sharing my own personal experience with you, that helps you to feel a little bit less alone. In this episode, we jump to a journal entry from October 2012, so that's about 9 months into my postdoc. I didn't journal much about work over that summer, which is why there's a 3 or 4 month time jump between now and the previous episode. But I did have a lot going on that summer. I remember I moved into my own apartment. This was the first time that I lived alone. This was quite a big change for me, and I remember at the time that was something I had wanted to do for years. I just never been able to afford it, but I was finally in a position where I was able to afford my rent for an entire apartment, and I didn't have to share with someone. I also, at this time, I started playing guitar for an improv comedy group, which would go on to be a huge part of my life in the years to come. So it was a busy summer. I just didn't really journal much about work. This is a journal entry I wrote while I was at the airport. I believe I was in the UK for a cousin's wedding, and I was on the return leg of the journey back to Frankfurt when I wrote this. So have a listen to the reading now, and I'll be back at the end with some thoughts after 12 years of hindsight. Enjoy. First of October 2012. At Heathrow now, flying back to Frankfurt soon. I got to the airport very early, purely because I wanted to have time to sit down and write in this thing. As usual, I've had so many ups and downs recently, and some heart-sinking moments in the last few months. But I haven't had any time to write it all down. So how's my life going in Frankfurt? Okay, I guess. It could be worse. I wish it was a lot better. Work isn't too great. There have been massive delays in getting any actual science done. Can't believe I haven't published anything yet, or produced any data. What have I actually achieved this year so far? Barely anything. I've co-authored one paper, which is being reviewed now. I'm on the organisation committee for a journal club. And I've reviewed 2 papers for journals. And that's it, I think. I have this horrible feeling that there will be a review of my performance at the end of the year, and I will be told that I am underperforming. By Christmas, I need to have a pilot GBS library sequenced. I need to have that grant proposal submitted. And I need to make substantial progress on my paper from my PhD. That feels feasible, but it still feels like it's not enough. I've been feeling very antisocial lately, simply lacking the energy to go out. And I'm stuck in this vicious cycle. I feel alone at home on my own, so I want to go out. When I do go out, I hate it, and I want to go back home. I don't feel that confident or happy about my life at the moment. Not much to be proud of. Okay, thank you very much for listening to that. As usual, I've written down some thoughts after reading that back and hearing that back. My first thoughts that came to mind when I was reading that one were, this one makes me feel very sad. I feel like I'm tapping back into one of those less happy moments during my postdoc, where I feel a little bit deflated. It feels like I'm experiencing it all again. In this journal entry, I'm basically saying that I don't think I'm good enough, and I wasn't performing well as a scientist. And when I read that back, I feel like I'm experiencing that feeling of self-blame again, and part of me thinks that that's true. I wasn't a very good scientist. I wasn't producing a lot of high-quality work, and that's why I wasn't successful. I'm ashamed to admit that, but that's what's happening in my brain and my body when I read that back. And honestly, I'm not quite sure what to say to a younger version of myself to make him feel better. Even today, after all my life experience and everything I've been through, I don't know how to support a 27-year-old Simit here. I don't know what to say to him. I guess there are still some old wounds in this journal, psychological wounds that haven't really healed properly. But let's see how I feel after going through everything. Before we get into the reflection, I want to ask you a quick question. Do you ever worry about your paper being rejected because the English isn't good enough? One thing I've always been good at is writing, but I know not everyone finds that easy. Perhaps English isn't your first language, or for some reason, the words you write just don't quite capture what you want to say. Good English can enhance your scientific credibility, increase the chance of your article being accepted, and speed up the peer review process. Whether you're a research scientist, a scientific writer, or part of a dynamic biotech company, I want to help you with my professional copy editing and proofreading services for scientific English. Enhancing the clarity and precision of writing has been an integral part of my professional life in academia and in the biotech industry for over a decade. If you need a native English speaker with a solid scientific background and a professional certification in proofreading to refine and polish your writing, I would love to help you. Please visit simitpatel.com, that's simitpatel.com for more information. Thank you, and now back to the show. One thing that came to mind when I was revisiting this journal entry is one of the more general problems in academia, and this is well documented, I'm not revealing anything new here, is that value is measured on very specific metrics of success. And that is mainly your publication record, grants, and any honoraria, and just being patted on the back at conferences. That's really the main metrics of success that really get you ahead. Any of your achievements outside of these few metrics of success are kind of nice to have in addition, and they are valued in their own way, but they don't really necessarily get you ahead in academia. So if you're, really good at keeping a lab book, if you're really organized, if you're really good at scientific illustrations for figures for papers, if you're good at presentations, if you're a really nice person, if you're trustworthy, if you get along with other people well, even some technical skills, if you're good at Linux system administration, if you're good at proofreading, if you're good at making really clean gels in the lab or whatever, people like those things, and every now and then they can help you catch a break and get onto projects and opportunities here and there. But ultimately, in the long run, that's not what you get judged on in academia. That's not necessarily enough to get you ahead and far ahead in academia. So if you're applying for a grant, for example, no one's going to say, well, you don't have any papers, but you do have really good communication skills and you're really friendly, so that's why we're going to give you the grant. That just doesn't happen. So a lot of your most valuable skills ultimately don't end up counting for anything. Your actual value, how you are actually judged by others and how you might judge other people, is based on the publication record. Now, in this journal entry, I said something like, I can't believe I haven't published anything yet, and I was generally feeling like everything I had achieved just wasn't enough. And I was clearly insecure about that because I was surrounded by a value system that told me that I should be insecure about that. And this value system can really get into your head to the point where you judge your own performance on your publication record. And that's where it starts to become dangerous, I think. I think it's one thing to have others judge you based on your publication record. It's another thing for you to start judging other people on their publication record. But I think it does the most damage when you judge yourself on that value system on your publication record. When that becomes second nature for you to think that way about others and to yourself, that's when you know you've been brainwashed into that academic system. I guess the lesson here is that the way you measure value and success, or your own value and your own success, can often be a product of your environment. And maybe it's helpful to put this into the context of my life once I left academia. So I left academia in 2015 and I went on to work in the scientific software industry. So I've been in a different work environment with a different value system for a while now. In that 9 or 10 years or so, I honestly can't think of a single time where my publication record was actually that important. Maybe occasionally from time to time it comes up, but it's not really a major thing. I've been working in an environment where my technical knowledge and my softer skills are more valued. So, how well I presented, how clearly I can explain complex things to people, how punctual I was, etc. In general, I would say that is much more in line with how I think my value should be measured. I have still had lots of stresses and strains in life outside of academia. Imposter syndrome is still a thing. Had various issues with bosses and misalignment of other values. So it's not like leaving academia just solved all of my problems, but it does demonstrate that how I measure my own value and success is very much a product of the environment that I'm in. In academia, where value and success is measured by your publication record, I was measuring my own value and success by my publication record, or lack thereof. In the scientific software industry, where value and success is measured by other things, I was measuring my value and success based on those other things. I said I needed to have a grant proposal submitted as well. This is another one of those extremely annoying things about working in academia. So at the time, I had a fixed term contract of 2 years, and I was lucky to have that at that point. And I had to be grateful. You're made to feel like you should be grateful to have a 2-year contract. You were given this prestigious opportunity to have a 2-year contract, and you had no right to complain about that, really. If you want a job after that, you basically have to find a way to pay for it yourself. In academia, you will find plenty of professors and research groups wanting to work with you. You may even be offered a position in different research labs all over the world. But that collaboration often takes the form of having to write a grant application together to create that job. So it's like being offered a job and then basically being told that you have to pay for it yourself, which is totally bonkers. And because of the way the funding cycles work and the long waiting times, you basically end up having to spend most of that short fixed-term contract writing a grant so that you can have another short-term fixed-term contract. And of course, you need to have published papers first before you can make a good grant application. So you need to focus on publishing the research first. But then, of course, you need more time to gather data and to actually write those papers. So then you focus on having to write the grant application to extend your contract. You're caught in this vicious cycle where you don't actually end up moving forward. It's a bit like just being on a treadmill. And the sad thing is, at the time, these sort of fixed-term contracts, I can remember during my PhD, this actually appealed to me. When I was in my early 20s, the idea of having to move to a different country every 2 or 3 years, and that actually seemed really exciting to me. That wasn't a problem for me. I thought that was a decent way to live. I thought that was quite exciting, and I liked that was built into the actual work itself. As I got older, I realized that that's a terrible way to live. You're just basically living out of a suitcase for the best part of a decade, and it's really hard to build a good life from that. And I said I needed to also make substantial progress on the paper from my PhD. So I had been trying to publish that paper for quite a long time. I actually ended up never publishing that paper. I never got around to it. So I had this habit, and to some extent I still have this habit, of putting off difficult tasks, or what seems like a difficult task. especially things that have been on my to-do list for a very long time. It's very illogical, but I find the longer something has been on my to-do list, the more I avoid tackling it. I procrastinate. Over time, I sort of build up a story in my head of this being an impossible, huge, scary task that just puts me off doing it, and then I never actually get it done. Now, procrastination is actually a symptom of perfectionism. In fact, a lot of what we've talked about in this podcast so far are symptoms of perfectionism. Things like low self-esteem, being self-critical. And going forward in the podcast, we will probably touch on other things like overreaction to mistakes, taking criticism very badly. These are all, symptoms of perfectionism. But what actually is perfectionism? It's really a set of behaviors that are rooted in fear. Okay, I was so afraid that this paper was not going to be any good. I was very insecure about the PhD research itself. I didn't think it was that good. I was so afraid of that paper not being very good, it would be criticized and I would somehow fail. So my subconscious decided that the best way to deal with that, the best solution to that problem was to not work on it at all. Because if I don't submit that paper, I can't get criticized. And I can't possibly fail because I haven't even tried. This was my fear's way of trying to keep me safe. It's a very twisted way to keep me safe because it wasn't very beneficial. But if you ask my fear would say, well, that's the best way to avoid that feeling of being criticized, and you can't possibly fail if you don't try. When you're training as a scientist, you don't really get taught how to deal with the psychological battle of being a scientist, or any profession for that matter. You learn all the technical stuff, you learn how to increase your knowledge and learn all the technical stuff you need to learn, but you don't really get taught about fear and perfectionism and how to have a healthy relationship with them. I'm only just starting to learn all of that now, and I'm having to teach myself. It's just not really part of any curriculum. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm just blaming academia for all my problems. I do believe in being responsible for my own choices and my actions. I think there are lots of internal components to the problems I was having. Talked about this a lot. I've journaled about it a lot. My own insecurities, me perhaps not knowing when to ask for help, or not knowing how to ask for help, or who to ask for help. And there's also an external component to all the problems I was having as well. The pressure to publish, academia's value system, etc. How important each of these internal and external components is, I think, is debatable. And I don't think it's really about blame, self-blame or blaming academia. I don't think necessarily either one of them is the actual problem. What's important is how those two things fit together. Do the external components provide a good environment for the internal components to not be such a big problem, or perhaps even the other way around? It's when your internal value system doesn't align with the value system of the environment around you, that's where you have a problem. It's not that your internal value system is incorrect, and it's not necessarily the environment's value system that is incorrect. It's the way those two fit together, or rather don't fit together. That's what generates the conflict. And I think it's really important to remember that if you get lost in self-blame, or even blaming the environment too much, if you think the world around you is against you all the time. If you spend too much time thinking about either one of those two, you got to realize that neither one of those is necessarily wrong. It's the way they fit together that causes the problem. I mentioned something about feeling antisocial and generally just feeling lonely. And this is very much the start of what I would describe as fairly chronic loneliness issues that I had in my late 20s and early 30s. And at various times since then, I have gone on to develop a degree of sort of social anxiety symptoms. Now, there is a great contradiction here. I mentioned earlier in the introduction to this episode that I was living on my own for the first time. And I really wanted to live on my own for a very long time. Even back when I was doing my PhD, I really wanted to live on my own. I really wanted my independence. I wanted my own space. I didn't want to have to deal with other people's problems or their mess or whatever. And I would actually crave time to myself. That was my time I looked forward to the most. But much of my depression and my anxiety symptoms over the years have very much been rooted in loneliness and that lack of connection to other people. So being on my own feels safer, but it hurts me as well, and therein lies the contradiction. I feel like loneliness, particularly in men, is a much wider issue in society, and what you're seeing play out in this journal is a fairly common story. Perhaps my loneliness was exacerbated by working in academia, which, as we've discussed in previous episodes, is a very lonely experience in and of itself. Perhaps being an expat in a foreign country also contributed to my loneliness. And perhaps the shitty time I was having at work as well also didn't help with my lonely situation. But I think there are just as many stories of loneliness out there, even without these elements of my story. Even with hindsight, looking back on it, I don't think I could have really lived my life any differently. I still believe that living on my own and having that sort of independent lifestyle was absolutely the best way for me to live my life. Learning to cope with loneliness has really given me so much, and it has really formed an integral part of the best parts of myself that I am proud of today. I'm not saying it was a good experience and I wouldn't recommend it to other people, but I don't think I would be the person I am today if I didn't have to cope with that loneliness. So there you have it. I guess I did find some words of wisdom for 27-year-old Simit in the end. Honestly, I can't help but feel like maybe I haven't done such a good job of this episode, but that could be my fear and perfectionism talking. Maybe this episode is actually good enough and valuable for someone out there. You tell me. If there is at least one nugget of wisdom in this episode that is valuable for at least one person, then perhaps this episode is good enough. In the next episode, we jump to about 2 weeks later, still in October 2012. It looks like I'm starting to experience some bullying, and I'm going through some things that are opening up some old wounds from back when I was doing my PhD. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that was valuable for you in some way. Until next time, please be kind to yourself.
Brood about it, brood until the day, one day I will find the words to say.
Thanks again for listening to A Postdoc's Journal. I've been your host, Simit Patel. If you've enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others who you think might find it helpful and interesting. You could also leave a review over at Podchaser or on Apple Podcasts. If you can relate to anything in this episode, or if you have your own take on this journal entry, I would love to hear from you. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Blue Sky. Links to all my social media are in the show notes. Thanks again.